And time. Nice work, you guys. So would you please come on back to your tables, your
Come on
original
back and we'll talk.
places.
Say bye to your learning partner, but not forever. You'll be back at the end of the day. What? Guacamole? So, let's talk about what happened. I'll tell you, some of you were so great in that if you get tired of your day job, you could try out for Saturday Night Live.
You know, also, this is the first EO group in this country that wasn't confused by that activity.
Well
you all
done.
Got it clean.
Super well done. Okay, now I want to do a poll. I want you to think back on those conversations you just had, okay? You just had two, right? One, you raised the issue, and the other, your partner raised the issue. So you just experienced two interactions. Thinking back on those conversations, if you can say the problems were on their way to being resolved, raise your hand. Love it. That's my favorite vote at the beginning. Okay, let me ask one other. Raise your hand if you can say relationship strengthened, trust deepened. Fabulous.
Perfect
Fabulous.
starting
This
point.
day is for you. Okay, now I want to get to the bottom of that. And let's do it this way with our kind of debrief of what just happened. You just experienced criticism in two directions. You experienced what it was like to try to give it, and you experienced what it was like to receive it. And I know there's all different words. Some people don't like the word criticism, feedback, downside feedback, whatever it was. You experienced what it's like to tell someone they're not doing something well enough and they need to do it better, and what it's like to hear that on your own. My question now, how do people normally, naturally, typically respond when someone's criticizing them?
Not you, but people you've known well over the years. What do they tend to do?
Defensive.
They
And
get
defensive looks different ways in different situations. What are some of the things that you would call defensive? What are some of the ways of responding? Body language, okay?
So the body language, like they tend to get smaller, they tend to close up.
Some others. Anger, yes.
And they interrupt.
Interrupting, more.
That's right.
So we have body language, anger, interrupting. What else are some normal, natural ways? Disconnect. Sigh. Turn
They
the
blame
table
it
and
on
they blame you, or they blame it on other people.
You're telling me I do this badly. Have you ever looked at yourself? They turn it around on us. Crying, yes.
The only thing you haven't said, I think, is super common. Yes, explaining, justifying, rationalizing, giving all kinds of reasons why I'm not a bad person for having done what you're saying, because it really wasn't my fault. All right, here's a harder question. What do every one of those natural approaches to criticism share in common? And before you answer, I want to acknowledge, I know they look really, really different on the outside. So for example, yelling in anger looks different than going silent. Going silent looks different than making excuses and explanations. That looks different than crying. And yet, Peter and I are convinced they all have the identical impact on the criticism, trying desperately to get in. What is the impact they all share? Exactly, Brooke. It pushes it away. It's a barricade. It's a blockade between me and the criticism. Watch. You criticize me. I yell in anger. Doesn't that push it away without listening? I blame somebody else. I make excuses, rationalizations. Hey, even if I start to cry, doesn't that often stop the criticism dead in its tracks? So we have developed over our lifetimes these natural approaches to criticism that keep it from getting too close to our delicate egos. So let me ask you one last question. Why is that even a problem? I mean, when you consider how poorly most people criticize us, Why shouldn't we have these natural mechanisms that protect our fragile ego? Can you think of any reason why we should put our hands down and really let the criticism wash over us? Okay, let's start with Carol. Well, I think both of you really said the same thing, Marcel and Carol. To get better, to grow, to learn. Now, let me be the first to say, I know that is not the most pleasant road to personal growth. But we cannot deny that within criticism could lie a kernel of truth that we could grow from. I think what happens is that kernel of truth is so deeply embedded in such ugly relationship messages that we have this automatic reaction to push the whole thing away because it feels so ugly. But you're right, there's a kernel of truth that we could learn from. That's one. Can you think of any other reasons to just hear it all? Yes, please. Let them get it off their chest. And why is that important? To build the relationship, exactly. And let me tell you one of the aha moments that came to us when we were doing the research for our latest book, Be Quiet, Be Heard. We were, I can't remember the moment that aha came, when we realized that the single best moment to turn around a relationship that is going down fast is when they criticize you. Now, I know that sounds odd, but here's why. When someone comes to you with criticism, they are expecting the worst. If instead of giving them the ugly response they're expecting, you give them the best, I mean, you're curious, you want to hear more, you want to understand, you want to really get what your part was in their problem. I mean, that relationship can go from 0 to 80 in 15 minutes. Any other reasons you can think of that it is important and powerful to listen to criticism even when it feels bad? There might be some truth, and let me throw one other thing out. Where does it go if you refuse it? Does criticism dissolve, go into thin air, never to be seen again because we say no? Okay, so you're saying it doesn't go away. Where does it go? Okay, I've heard it said in different ways. It goes to other people. You can call it gossip, subgrouping, triangulation. But it basically means I have an issue with John, but I'm afraid to tell John, so I tell Carol. Carol and I bond over why we can't talk to John. John's the last one to know. Sometimes he never even finds out. I will tell you, that is the biggest dysfunction we have seen in organizations all over the globe, big and small, public and private, not-for-profit, for huge profit. That is toxic. Now, if you are saying to yourself or thinking at some point, geez, I'd love to do something so that nobody ever talks about me again. I would like a life where people talk to me, not about me. You can single-handedly make that happen by getting the reputation as someone who appreciates downside feedback, who applauds it, who really knows you can learn from it. Because I promise you this, once a person is no longer afraid to talk to you, they will talk to you, and they have no reason to talk about you. Now, I feel like I should go on record as saying, I'm not so naive as to believe that any of this is easy. I get it's not easy. In fact, most of us get an actual physical reaction to criticism. It's an adrenaline rush that plays out different ways in different bodies. But basically, what it means is that when we're criticized, we feel it. We don't just think it. In fact, some of you might have seen the Harvard article in the Harvard Business Review. It was real interesting, where the researchers are trying to figure out why is it that people are so defensive when they're criticized. And their theory, after all of their research, goes something like this. It all started when we were back in the caves as cave dwellers. So picture this. Here we are, minding our own cave dweller business, when out of nowhere, a big beast attacks, we know that we could all be dinner. But fortunately for our cave dweller community, that adrenaline would rush through our bodies. Danger, danger, panic, panic, rush, rush. Blood goes to our arms, goes to our legs. We can fight harder and run faster.
Now, some people, though, they froze right in their tracks, but they were eaten out of the gene pool. We don't see them that often.
That was not in the Harvard Business Review article, but Peter is fairly certain the freezers are not walking amongst us today.
Well, fewer of them. I think that makes sense.
In any case, the researchers went on to say, but that doesn't explain the present tense. I mean, there are no big, scary beasts attacking us anymore. Why are we still defensive when we're criticized? And that was their aha moment. That as we've come out of the caves, we have become symbolic creatures, meaning symbols, words are our weapons. So it no longer has to be physical danger that brings on the adrenaline danger response, right? It can be, yes, it could be that too. It could be someone who reports to us, who's very important in the business, saying to us, you know, you talk a good game about collaboration, but the bottom line is you're a micromanager and we only do what you want to do. The beast is at the door.
Or maybe it's one of your biggest customers, and they say to you, you know, you talk about service. You pride yourself on excellent service. And then this is what I get? The beast is at the door.
Or your life partner says, you never listen to me. You don't care at all what I think or feel. You don't care at all about this family. All you care about is that business. The beast is at the door. So do you see how important this is? It is words that create a physical adrenaline reaction in our bodies. And that is what makes us go to autopilot and say and do things that we're sorry about later. Now, I'm going to give you one piece of bad news and then a bunch of good news. Bad news first. That adrenaline rush may never stop when somebody criticizes you poorly. Meaning, putting it in its worst possible terms, for the rest of your life, when somebody gives you downside feedback, because most people are crappy at doing it, for most of your life it might be that you get that physical reaction that's basically saying danger, danger, panic, panic. But here's the good news. That will never again put you into autopilot reaction, because we're going to introduce a 5-step skill model that will transform that, because when the adrenaline rushes, you'll feel it, but you'll notice it in a different way and say, pause. This is when I use the 5-step model for responding to criticism. And when we come back from our break, we will introduce that model to you.
Now, a word about the break. People often leave us alone thinking that we have to prepare for what happens after the break. We are prepared. And we really enjoy spending the breaks with you. We're on a 4-week tour. We spend all this time together. We do like spending breaks with you.
So please talk to us. I mean, even if we're in the bathrooms, you can talk to us then.
If you're the right gender.
So if you, everybody look at your own watch, because they might say different things. And why don't we plan to be back in the room in about 12 minutes, because in 15 minutes, Peter and I will start talking.
Okay.
All right.
See you
soon.
then. It's 2 minutes from this moment.
Only by seconds.
How many years ago was that?
You know, it's almost 7 years. 7 years.
Oh my God, I've been paying $5,000
We signed up. We signed up before it was officially opened. I remember that. Like, I remember it was like it was in March or April event. We signed up, and I remember the next day, they said when they
He wanted to be number one. And
So
I'm like,
how
go ahead.
often do you go to Yosta?
Quite a bit.
We're going to probably start doing the universities in 2020. Right now, we're going to Asia. This is all EO. Asia in January.
Nice. Shanghai.
Okay,
Go
they
hang
call it
out.
South Asia, but it's really India.
Oh, cool.
8 chapters in India.
They're
And then,
actually much stronger chapters.
do you know how much
5
Jews
million
are?
is the minimum in Shanghai.
The
Yeah, yeah.
Jews are 50,000 a
Yeah.
year.
Shanghai, the minimum is 5 million. 5 or 10 million now, East and West Shanghai. We're like chump change, $1 million here. You know?
You guys are great. These are the first 2 members of this chapter.
So if you'll find your seats, we're going to get started. And we're going to start with probably the most important model of all, so you don't want to be late and you don't want to miss it.
Page 10 is where we'll be beginning. Thanks for talking to us during the break.
Yeah,
It's
that was
so
enjoyable, those of you who
fascinating.
chose to speak with us. And if you didn't get a chance to talk to us, we're hanging out afterwards, so please do. So this is a 5-step model for responding to criticism and anger. And while it's 5 steps, let me tell you, it really crunches into 2 basic moves. Both of them very unnatural, by the way. Move number 1, when criticized, get more information. And move number 2, agree with the critic. And we're going to show you, even if somebody calls you an idiot, there are 2 things you can almost always agree to. And one of them is not that you're an idiot. And we'll show you what we mean. So here's the challenge when a difficult message is coming at us that really strikes us to the quick. It feels deeply personal, and we get very offended. Here's the great challenge: to move from furious to curious. It's an easy thing to say, much more difficult to carry out. So I'm going to suggest to you a 2-step move that will really give you the wherewithal even to begin getting into this model. Number 1, move your body into a posture of curiosity. We did a 3-year longitudinal study with our classes at the University of Oregon, and we had half of our class sitting like you were earlier with their arms folded, leaning back, and we had the other half listening in a very curious, attentive posture. And the ones who were listening with that attentive posture got the information more quickly up front, and they remembered that information longer. Exactly what was going on in their brain, we don't know, but we do know it works. So when somebody criticizes me and says something, Glazer, you moron, believe me, all of my instincts want to do this. But I force myself into a curious, attentive posture because I know I will listen better. It's one of the few times in life where the posturing of our body actually helps our brain take in information more cleanly. That's move number 1 non-verbally, to move from furious to curious. The second move came in our work with the U.S. Senate. So we've been working now for about 15 years with a bipartisan group in the Senate. The rule is it's got to be 50% Republican and 50% Democratic.
Surely you've been seeing the results of our labors.
Yeah, no. It's a work in progress. In any event, when we got there on day 1, I will tell you, we went home clinically depressed. And I really mean that. Because here's what was happening. A Republican would say something that got into a Democrat's craw, or vice versa, and it was like this. Boom! They were jumping on each other so quickly. It was common response, common response. And at the end of that day, the sweat was pouring off of us. And I remember standing in our hotel room. The Washington Monument was behind us, and we were hugging like this. Some people like us. We'll get through this. I mean, we felt terrible, and I really do mean that. I mean, our best chance to help our dysfunctional government, and we fell flat on our faces, and we really did. But luckily, it was a 2-day program. And on the second day, we came through with the following move that really was a breakthrough. And it's been a breakthrough for every group we work with. We call it the 5-second pause and ponder. Here's how it works. Criticism comes in at you. Before you say a word, you go silent for 5 full seconds. Now, during those 5 seconds, you have to look curious and attentive. If you look like this, it doesn't work so well. So you're leaning in, you're looking very curious and attentive, and here's what you're saying to yourself. What do they want me to understand? What are they trying to get across? What do they wish that I would glean from the comments that they just made? Because your ability to listen deeply and really understand what they're saying and be able to feed it back to them is so monumental in a conflicting conversation. Let's demonstrate. Do you remember when Susan came in to talk to me? What was your opening line?
I attacked you with the following phrase. You are undermining my leadership in this business. You are sabotaging my ability to be a leader with my team.
And do you remember what I said to her? I said, I see your lips are moving, I hear sound coming out. You know, it felt good to say that. You know, just because I was cathartic, but I think you'll agree it would do nothing for our relationship or the problem at hand. So instead, I will say something like, wow, so something I'm saying or doing feels like it's making it impossible for you to be an effective leader in this company.
Can you see how different that would get our interaction started? That in itself is going to change the trajectory of our conversation. Now, I also want to acknowledge that is one of the hardest things to do. We have many models that we teach in 3 different courses, and I would say that one micro skill is the hardest of all. You know what makes it tough? When somebody is criticizing you in a dysfunctional way, to have your mind be able to flip around and try to figure out what do they want me to understand is a very heavy lift. So if it's not coming to you, I'm going to give you 3 words now. Please write them in the margin because they could save you many times over. The words are, tell me more. And they work best in a question. So if somebody attacks you with criticism and you're not even able to paraphrase, even after 5 seconds, say to them, wow, can you tell me more?
And here's why this is so important and such a powerful move. And it's based on a whole body of research that suggests the person in a one-to-one dialogue, like the ones we've been doing in here, the person who talks 51% or more, in other words, the person who does a little more of the talking, feels better about the conversation, feels better about the other person, and catch this one, feels more committed to whatever decision comes out of that conversation. So there are so many benefits to getting that person to do a little more of the talking than you're doing.
That's step 1. Step 2 on the next page says ask for details. I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but as soon as I tell you, you will see it
Wait,
daily.
before you go further, Van, is that a question about step 1? Sure.
Okay.
Go for it. A question, correct.
Okay, so instead of saying, Van, tell me more, I would just say, Van, can you tell me more about that?
So that it's not going to make you defensive.
It's not a demand, it's a request.
Right.
Thank you. So step 2, ask for details. The problem with most criticism is that comes in the generic form, as in, you're not a team player. You're a micromanager. You never listen. You get belligerent when you get upset. You're too moody. You cannot deal with generic criticism. So step 2 says, can you help me out and tell me what am I saying or doing that's giving you this impression? The only way you can mess up step 2 is at the relationship level of meaning. So let me show you what that sounds like. Let me get this straight. You're saying I'm not a team player. Give me one example of anything I have ever done to hurt this team. Now, I can say all I did was ask for details and they just got more upset. But I think you'll agree at the relationship level of meaning, I wasn't asking for anything, right? What was I really saying? I dare you. Prove it.
You're either wrong or stupid. Probably both.
So you can ask for details in any way you want, as long as the relationship message is saying, I want to learn more. Now, even if you ask for details perfectly, you won't always get them. I actually think most human beings have never learned the art/science of describing behavior. And by the way, I really hope you get it before this day is over. But most people who criticize you won't know how to do that. So even if you ask for details well, you sometimes come up empty-handed. And I want to foreshadow the two ways they give you nothing. Way one. No, I cannot give you one specific example, but trust me, it happens all the time, and I'm not the only one who doesn't like it. It annoys everybody. I know how tough that is to hear. I actually believe it's the best way to not get details, because watch how confusing the other mode is. The other way people don't give us details, they act like they're giving them. Sometimes we get duped into thinking we got them, but it's just another layer of generalized negativity. Watch. Oh, you want an example? No problem, because it just happened in our all-team meeting yesterday. We were trying to talk about how to recruit and retain new team members. You kept harping on one idea, and when it got voted down, you just became belligerent and dismissive. Why am I standing up here saying that didn't count as a detail? Does anybody know? You learned about the meeting, you learned about the topic, you learned about the way the interaction unfolded, and I'm saying that doesn't count as a detail. Exactly, Marcel. The words belligerent and dismissive are judgments. They are not behaviors. They're perceptions. They are not facts. And so when you don't get details in either that modality or that, you move to the unnatural move in this model, the most unnatural move in many of our models, step 3, to guess. So what we're saying is, if you ask for details and you come up empty-handed, you guess at something you think it might have been.
So this is usually the first point of resistance in this program. I mean, we've had people sitting right where you are at this juncture say to us, are you kidding me? I'm supposed to give that other person rope to hang myself with? I mean, why would I do that? And besides, what if I guess wrong? And the person says, aha, I didn't even think of that one, you miserable dog. By the way, no one's ever been killed for a wrong guess using this model. And why do you suppose that is? What's the relationship message? Simply in the act of guessing. Yes, Craig.
Yes.
I am trying to find out, to get to the bottom of this. And I care so much about what you just said to me. I'm going to make myself vulnerable right now and offer up something you may not have thought of before. How many of you are aware of the work of Brene Brown?
University of
Okay,
Houston
good for
researcher.
you. Yeah, she's right down the road. Well, let me give you a quote that captures the essence of her work, because she studies vulnerability. What she says is the most dangerous myth facing our culture today is that vulnerability is a weakness. When it comes to human connection, vulnerability is one of our most powerful tools at our disposal. So when you are willing to expose something you might have done wrong by guessing, you are making yourself vulnerable, and in so doing, bringing the two of you a little closer together.
So look where we are now. Criticism came in, but we did not go unconscious. We did not go on autopilot reaction. We paused for 5 seconds. We pondered what they said. We paraphrased their intent if we could. And if not, we would say, can you tell me more? Then we asked for details. And if we didn't get them, we guessed. Now we have the gold standard of conflict. We have the facts that brought them to us in the first place. We know what we said or did that was so disturbing to our critic. And now it's time for agreement. And let me say a word about this. Yes, please.
So you guess, and you're saying that you're going to get the facts by guessing. So you're saying that that's going to bring out from the other person what they're really thinking.
So let me show
really,
exactly. So I'm going to show you
That's
how.
the hope.
Good point. So let me show you how I might do that with the one I did at the meeting. What were the two words? Do you remember the words?
Belligerent.
Belligerent and dismissive.
Dismiss.
Okay. So I could say to the person, "This. Watch me guess now." So I want to be sure I understand what you mean by belligerent and dismissive. I know at that meeting, at the very beginning, I was advocating strongly for what I thought would help us recruit and retain great team members. And when it got voted down, I did say to the group, I know this is going to fail like every other plan we've ever had on this topic. And after I made that comment, I didn't say another word the whole meeting. Is that what you were responding to? And if the person says any rendition of, yes, that was out of line, it completely ruined the meeting, it set the wrong tone, at least I know in my heart, I know the facts. And then watch how I can agree. One thing I can agree with are the facts. You're right. After being one of the most vocal people at the beginning of the meeting, I made that comment, and then I didn't say another word. Do you see all those facts to agree with? And then watch how I can acknowledge the critic's perception. I can say, and even though it was not my intention to mess up the meeting by reacting in that way, now that I hear from you, I see how that could have very well happened. So let us show you what this looks like when it's all flowing together. So if you open your materials to, I'm thinking it's page 13. Let's take a quick look. Yep, 13. So we're going to go back to the scene that we first did this morning. But instead of what you saw, we're going to pretend Peter attended this event. I did not. So Peter will demonstrate how you can use this model even when the other person is dysfunctional and angry. By the way, I think these are too far forward because these people will just see our backs. All right. I'm back. So if
See, we don't always agree.
and I'm telling you, Brandon is still going to see the back of your head. In any case, he was the director. We met auditioning for plays. So when we
then
do,
she had an affair with the director, but that's another story.
when we do this scene, one of the main questions that we're asked in this program is, doesn't it require two people to be skilled in order to make any of this work? And that's a big concern, because I know for a lot of you, a person that you're writing on is not here, right? What if they don't know these skills? What we want you to see all afternoon long is that we've developed these models so that one person can make a difference. It really doesn't require two. Now, when both are using the skill sets, that is incredible. But we have designed them for one person. So this will be take two. I will stay dysfunctional. Peter will demonstrate how he can use this model. And if you would like to follow along step by step, he'll go through every step.
And the reason, by the way, that I did move the seats forward is that all primates are more peaceful when they're sitting. They tend to be in fight mode when they're standing. So I'm going to sit her down very quickly on this rendition. So here we go.
And Peter, you know, I got another idea. Why don't you make a mistake so they can watch it as a model, but they can also keep an eye out for something that's not right.
Okay.
All right, take two.
By the way, it's not going to be the hand in her face, so please keep watching. All right, so here we go. Take two. Oh, hi, Sue. Hey, come on in. Have a seat. What can I do for you?
All right, I know you're a busy guy, and I'm really busy too, so I'm not going to waste any time sugarcoating anything or beating around the bush. Let me just get right to the point and say it. You are sabotaging my leadership in this business, okay? It's out.
Wow. So something I'm doing or saying feels like it's making it really difficult, if not impossible, for you to be successful as a leader in my company.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sue, can you help me out and tell me, what is it? What am I doing or saying that's feeling,
You want an example?
if you would?
No problem, because it happens daily. You allow a constant stream of people who are upset with me to moan and whine and complain to you. You do not send them back. You do not bring me in. You don't even tell me it's happening. By the way, can you tell that was not an example? It was one of those generic judgment, negative perceptions, but I did not give him anything specific. If he wants something concrete, he's going to have to guess.
So, Susan, if this is an example of what you mean, earlier today, Frank Gibson came in to talk to me. To see a grown man crying all over my desk, it wasn't pretty. And what he was so upset about, he was talking about the sick child that he has, and
You know what,
that he
Pete?
needs to work at home.
Pete, this is such a perfect example. I cannot tell you how perfect an example this is. Yes, let's use that as an example. Not more than 2 months ago, you created a policy that says no more working from home. We won't talk about why, we won't talk about everything that went into it, but that's the policy. I'm your person out there trying to be sure that over time this happens. So the reason Frank Gibson's such a perfect example is because daily I have people saying, well, I need to work from home, I have a sick kid. Well, I need to work from home, I have a phone call coming in from overseas. Yes, if I spent my day deciding whose sob story was the best, I would have no other time to do anything. So I said to Frank, that's not possible because we now have a full here, no work from home policy. And he said, we'll see about that. I don't have to deal with you. I'm talking to Pete. And that's how that conversation ended.
He said that to you.
That is exactly what he said to me.
Well, Sue, you're right. I set that policy. I set all the policies. And you do a really good job keeping people to those policies. And I can see when I then come in and I make an allowance, how it would put you in a spot where it causes you to feel like I'm undermining your authority.
Exactly.
I get it. But, sweetheart, you get bent out of shape about such little things.
You found the mistake.
You missed it.
Okay, so for those of you who didn't find the mistake, let me say it was not just the word sweetheart, and it was not just the phrase bent out of shape. Did you hear the word right before sweetheart? But, exactly. Do you know the word but does a really weird thing to our brain? It says everything before this word was just fluff to butter you up for the kill. Now you're going to find out what I really think. So, what's your choice? Peter can't stop there, right? He needs to give me feedback on interacting with people as well as keeping
Right, I got her
policies.
listening, but I haven't had a chance to say anything from my point of view.
So for those of you who are interested in beating the butt habit, there are 2 choices. And by the way, it is not okay to say however, it is not okay to say yet. They have the same impact as but. Here's what you can say. You can use the word and. This is true, and also this is true. Or you can start a brand new sentence. In this case, Peter could say, I really understand now what drove you here, Susan.
And Sue, now could I share with you what has been going on for me so we can see it from my vantage point as well? And the odds of her saying okay and listening to what I have to say goes up astronomically. Human beings have this very unique capacity to listen well to people who listen well to them. If you doubt that, I mean, somebody you consider a lousy communicator, really give yourself over and hear them out. When it's your turn to speak, the odds of them hearing you are greatly increased.
So, before we move on to our second model for raising delicate issues, let's pause and see if you have any questions for us at all about this first model for responding to criticism and anger. Yes, please. Mhm. Okay, so the question, and it is a very good one, is if Peter, after he listens, moves forward with, now can I share my perspective? Isn't that the same as an excuse? Here's the difference. If in fact you go through this model, and I mean step by step, every step, and by the way, something we didn't tell you was the more time you linger on agreement, there's a linear relationship between how long you agree and how much the other person feels heard, how specific your agreement and how much they feel heard. If you go through this entire model and I feel fully heard and understood, and then he asks permission, as he did there, could I share with you the experience I've been having around this, then my character would much more likely say, okay. And it's way different than if I start by saying, you're sabotaging my leadership, you're undermining my leadership, and he pops in with, well, I have to because people feel like they're being cut off by you. People feel like they're being demeaned by you. And suddenly that feels like he hasn't heard a thing I had to say, that he was just pushing back at me. So it is a good question, and it's all about timing. Yes, Tom.
What if he says, "Can I tell you what I've been going through?" And you say, "No, that's not what this is about." Can you stop? Will you stop?
So if
Yes, what I would say, did you hear that, by the way? Yeah, what I would say at that juncture is, Sue, when would be a good time? Because this is an issue we've really got to work through, and if it's not good for you right now,
let's talk about when it would be
let's
good.
set a time that would really work.
And you'll see, Tom, when we get to our model for raising issues, the very first step is figuring out a time that works for the person you want to raise the issue with.
Yep.
Thanks. Jesse.
So I feel like the guess step is a little sugar-coated. That typically goes more like, oh, you don't know, or now you're just, or they actually truly don't know, and you present what you think is that actually may not be the scenario, or they haven't they're thrown back from the fact that you're showing interest, and they actually don't really know what triggers.
I'm trying to figure, I'm not sure that I understand the question, so let me.
So the question is specifically is the guess method may not directly introduce a plausible scenario.
So,
into the
okay.
equation.
So here's what usually happens, Jesse. Once you guess, even if it's a wrong guess, it loosens a logjam in their mind because now they're not feeling as threatened because they see you reaching out to try and be helpful, and suddenly their mind starts working better. Sometimes, as Carol is suggesting, you have to do a second guess. And by the way, I would not go to a third, fourth, and fifth guess. I mean, at some point, I would say at that juncture, well, let's talk again and really think hard on it because I'd like to work this thing through with you, and it would really help if we had something tangible on the table that we could figure out.
So,
They come from a lot of emotion and they have no specifics. We encounter that where they're like, there's a huge problem, and then you ask for a specific, and they can't.
They can't give it to you.
see, let me respond to that, Marcel. So Marcel's point is that very often when they are coming at you, it is from a place of deep emotion, but they don't even have a specific in mind. And so in many ways, what we're saying is you need to help them be a better critic. And I think you're absolutely right. Remember, I said probably no more than 10 minutes ago, most people have never figured out the art and science of describing behavior. So when they say, and the problem is that you've just been belligerent and moody, they think they're giving you details. So if you guess and say, so let me think if this, tell me if this is an example, and you give the example, and they say, no, that isn't an example, but I can tell you what an example is, because suddenly you're teaching them how to describe behavior, and you're teaching them what it is you'd like to know more about. Now, I also want to go back to what Peter said. After 2 guesses, here's what you say. I really want to understand more about what I'm doing that's so disturbing to you. So are you willing, the next time it happens, to tell me right away? And if it's impossible to tell me right away, write it down so you can tell me about the specific.
So, for example, if it's something to do when you're working with a customer, maybe you're both with the, I mean, you don't want to hear it right in the moment, but as soon as it's over, let me know what was going on for you.
So by giving them permission to doing that, that's also a way to keep that communication open and working. Great questions. Any
Yes.
others? So as we segue into raising delicate issues, you would be surprised to know how many people have told us that it's harder for them to give criticism than to receive it. They usually add, don't get me wrong, I don't like hearing it either, but it's harder to give it. Well, let's just do a quick poll here. How many of you, let's say in the last 4 months, had someone at work say something or do something that was irritating enough that even when you went home, it was still on your mind? And I'm going to make it harder. Don't raise your hands yet. And even, let's say, after you slept on it, you woke up the next morning and you hadn't fully forgotten. It was still rattling around in your head. Raise your hand if you can relate to that scenario. Okay, I think it's everybody. Okay, so now it's the next morning. It's still on your mind. How many of you went to the person and told them?
Carol, you're all alone.
Okay,
in a
there's
good
one
way.
other? Okay. So, my last question. If you had said something or done something to another person at work, and it was disturbing enough that they were carrying it home, they were bringing it back to work the next day, how many of you would want that person to tell you about it? Can I see your hands? Okay, so now we're up to, I believe, everybody again. So let's make sense of that vote. I'll give you the results, you give me the interpretation. Virtually all of us said, I would absolutely want someone to tell me if I were to do something that was that disturbing for them. And yet, even in a group filled with people who value that kind of direct communication, 2 people raised their hands when they could have. So here's my big question. What is it about raising issues that's so nerve-wracking, so stressful, so anxiety-provoking that even people who value it avoid it? What are we all avoiding? Vulnerability, perhaps. Yes. What else are we avoiding?
Conflict.
Rejection. Conflict. Yeah, I think most people would avoid conflict, even if it means putting up with behavior that's driving you crazy. So why is that? What do we fear would happen? Rejection is one of the things I think we fear. Conflict goes the wrong way, and now now I'm the one that's being criticized and nailed. Okay, what else? Say again?
I'm being too hard.
Oh, I'm being too hard
Oh,
on them.
maybe it's
more
about
about
me.
me.
Or you don't want to hurt their feelings.
You-
You want to be able to get the problem resolved without damaging their ego or hurting their feelings.
You don't want to hurt their feelings, damage their ego, and I would add on to that, Carol, damage the relationship that I have with that person.
And drive them away, and
drive
maybe
them
we
away,
need them.
as you were mentioning. Did we miss anything? Lawsuit. Well, you're a good person at that table. So,
Well, and
okay.
people have said also, and they're not going to change anyway, so why should I beat my head against a wall?
So let me say, what I wish is that I could stand up here right now and say, hey, don't worry, none of that will happen to you. But of course I can't say that because we've all seen that happen. So here's what I'll say instead. It's a cost-benefit analysis. And I would like to share what we believe are the huge benefits of creating a lifetime practice around raising issues mastery, that you are compelled to do it. So here's how the scale tilts. Number one, don't forget the research that Peter quoted. Bottom line is this: if you stuff all of the things that are getting you worried and anxious and stressed, you're going to get sick, your life will be shorter, and bad stuff will happen. Let's just use that as a given. By the way, there's some new research we can talk to you about later. It's not just the stress itself, it's the feeling of negativity about the stress that creates cortisol. When you look at stress as excitement and energizing, it creates oxytocin, which is the cuddle hormone, which is a good thing. But let's just say for now, if you stuff things, you could get sick. Second, remember what I've been saying a few times. When you do this well, you can solve the problem, strengthen the relationship, and deepen trust, and that is a huge outcome. Now, for those of you who are thinking, all right, Susan, that's like the 4th time you've said it. I get how you could solve a problem by criticizing someone, but I have no idea how you could strengthen the relationship and deepen trust. So let me respond to that right now. So few people have ever experienced what it is like to have a conversation that hits an issue so directly, so concretely, and at the same time with such deep respect, listening, and accountability, that when you have had a conversation with someone else like that, your relationship is not status quo. It is stronger and more resilient than before you had that interaction. And let me offer 2 more reasons. How many of you have ever read Good to Great by Jim Collins? Wow, huge amount of people. Okay, so we've had a number of occasions to get to talk with Jim about our bodies of work. And here's how he sees the intersection between his work and our work. And this is all direct quote from Jim. No organization can ever get from good to great. No family, no government, no school can ever get from good to great if people aren't willing to talk about what's not great yet. It is our skill and commitment to talking about how can we be greater that lets us achieve greatness. And I want to give one final reason for raising issues skillfully. Have you ever thought that what you permit, you promote? Now, I completely understand that none of you are wanting to promote the behaviors that are keeping you up at night. I get that. I also want you to understand that when something is happening in your business and it is not okay and you don't address it, you are promoting it by permitting it. And here's the bigger burden. Because of the leadership roles that all of you have in your business, people around you watch you permitting that. They know you're promoting it. And they lose hope because what they see and what they think is, wow, my boss is letting that slide? That means it will never go away. I'm going to have to either live with it forever or leave. So for all of those reasons, raising issues is a crucial life skill. Now I want to say one more word about pedagogy, the science of teaching, because our research comes right into this pocket too. We are going to introduce this model differently than we did the responding to criticism model, and here's how. We are going to do it step by step. So we're going to introduce step 1, and then you're going to all write out how you will apply step 1 to the issue you raised earlier today.
Check page 28, because that's going to be your work page. And would you please dog ear page 28? Because we'll be going back and forth. It will be the work plan you'll be developing.
By the way, if you look at page 28, I want you to see that right next to it is a duplicate page 29. We just started doing this because people didn't want to write on page 28 because they wanted to copy it when they got back so they could do it again. Well, that's why you got page 29. So you can write all over page 28, and you have our commitment that you can copy page 29, and that is not part of any intellectual property agreement. We would like you to keep a desk full of page 29s copied. In fact, the next time somebody comes to you complaining about somebody else in the business, you know what they're saying at the relationship level. Handle this for me. You're not handling it anymore, because from now on you're going to pull out page 29, which is going to be blank, and say to them, I'm going to teach you something right now that will be a life changer for you. I'm going to show you how you can raise this issue with that person, and then you can do it yourself. But I digress. Let me tell you how we're going to do this. So we're going to introduce step 1, and then you're going to go to page 28 and write out how you will apply that for the issue that you chose to work on today. Then we'll introduce step 2, and you'll write out how you would do step 2. By the time we finish telling you about step 4, you will have an outline of the entire conscious conversation. You will return to your learning partner for a do-over, except it will be a very different do-over because you will have notes, and so it will be conscious, intentional, and deliberate, and wait until you see the difference. So for now, let's go back and talk about step 1 in this model. And do you know what page it is, Peter?
It's either 20 or 21. Check it out.
Okay. I think it's probably 20.
Okay, page 20.
20.
By the way, this model is easier than the last one, because the last one you're kind of showing up and suddenly you get hit between the eyes. This one you can think through in advance, and we highly recommend you do think through difficult issues in advance. Step 1, the opener. Twice now, Susan's character has just lambasted me right at the beginning, right? She needs to get my buy-in even to have the conversation. She needs to say something like, Peter, can I talk to you about something I'm really concerned about? Is this an okay time? And if my character does any rendition of this, I've got about 30 seconds. Shoot. Not a good time. You can't work out a difficult issue in 30 seconds. Now, the heart and soul of step number 1 is converting you accusative language into I-feeling language. So let's go back to the scene unfolding before you.
Did you remember all the accusations I leveled at him at the beginning? You are sabotaging my leadership. You're undermining my credibility. You talk to people behind my back. You never send them in. You never... I have to edit all of that out. That is so you accusative that if I go there, he's going to think that beast is attacking him and going into panic protection mode. So instead, I need to convert that into I-feeling language. Now, how many of you have heard of I statements before? Okay. I'm going to take you, and for those of you who didn't, no problem, because I'm going to take everybody about 3 miles beyond I statements. What I'm going to do here is create an I vulnerable feeling. I'm going to edit out all of that accusation that I just repeated to you, and instead try to find the best vulnerable feeling that would describe how I am right now. In this case, I would say something like, I'm feeling isolated, like I'm an outsider on my own team. Now, can you see how that statement would go farther than you're undermining, you're sabotaging, you're gossip, all of that stuff? Now, I want to tell you a couple of things to really lift you to the highest possible level when you're doing I-feeling statements. First of all, the research on self-disclosure is absolutely unequivocal. Self-disclosure is the single greatest predictor of relationship. Self-disclosure is defined as anything I tell you that you could not know if I hadn't. By the way, part of the reason that EO forums are so powerful is because those are friendships based on self-disclosure. Now, it is not self-disclosure if I say, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and I'm annoyed, and I'm yelling and the veins are popping in my neck. That is not self-disclosure. I want to tell you where you look to find these primary vulnerable feelings. The biggest mistake people make is that they think if they use the word feel, what comes after that is a feeling. But very often, it's a thought or a cognition, and that has no power at all. Let me show you what I mean. If I say, I feel you care more about yourself than the team, nope, it's not a feeling because I could substitute the word think. I think you care more about yourself than the team. I'll do another one. Remember, if you can substitute the word think, it is a cognition, it is not a feeling, and it doesn't have the same impact. I feel you don't care how you're perceived by our customers. Nope. I think you don't care about how you're perceived by our customers. So do you see what I'm saying? The key here.
Sure, show them how if you use a real
that's right.
feeling, it won't.
So if I say I'm feeling isolated, like I'm an outsider on my team, I can't say I'm thinking isolated. I'm thinking like, do you see what I mean? So that's one of the tests for making it a feeling and not a thought. So what we'd like you to do now is to go to page 28. Only step 1. You're not working ahead. Only on step 1. Would you please come up with a way to experience a primary vulnerable feeling? And by the way, on page 21, you will notice we have a list, an alphabetical list of primary feelings that are there for you to choose among if you're not sure how you feel.
So we'll take about 90 seconds and give you a chance to do that. Don't forget the opener. If you just say, I'm upset, it's a little abrupt. So first the opener, then the I feeling. 90 seconds.
Okay. I would like to now draw your attention to page 22, which I sometimes think of as the most important page in the materials. And I'm going to tell you why. Remember I said a little earlier that most human beings never learn the art and science of behavior description. That's what we're going to get at right now with page 22. We are recommending that you edit out these words from your vocabulary forever. And I hardly ever say all or never, but I will say this. These words will always get in your way when you're raising an issue. And I want to tell you why. If you say to someone, you come across as negative, toxic, and belligerent, or you say to someone, you're nitpicky and rigid, you're unsupportive, you're judgmental, you're intimidating, let me tell you what's going to happen. Number one, this is how they will now be listening. They will be their adrenaline will be rushing through their bodies. They will not be able to hear anything you say because they will be in such an utter state of panic and fear.
Because you will be the beast.
And their amygdala will kick in and their cortex will stop working. There is nothing worse than that, except for this. They will have no idea what you're talking about when you use these words. You know why? Because a person who I might label nitpicky and rigid would never choose those words to describe their own behavior. So they don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, you tell me. A person I might label nitpicky and rigid, what words do you think they would use to describe themselves? Organized, detail-oriented, meticulous.
Professional.
So you see what's happening? Watch this, folks, because I'm asking you to do a heavy lift when I say don't ever use those words again. But I want you to see what's happening. I'm calling this person nitpicky and rigid. They're getting completely defensive, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Can you imagine a worse lose, lose, lose? Could I tell them about Oren? Okay. Peter mentioned that we work with the Senate and the House, too. But he was talking mostly about our work in D.C. We also work with individual senators and do retreats with their senior staff. So we were working with Senator Orrin Hatch and his staff in Park City, Utah. And we got to this page in the materials. And Orrin started waving them in the air as if the light of clarity was shining upon him. And he said, Sue, Pete, does this mean that I should never again call Patrick Leahy a dumbass? Yes, Orrin, that is precisely what it means. So,
By the way, I did tell Patrick Leahy that, and he really thought it was funny. So.
and by the way, for who knows why, Orrin said we could share that if ever we
Well,
wanted.
he's retiring, I think.
Maybe because he's retired. By the way, our relationship with Orrin, we were talking about it at dinner last night, really kind of clarifies the proposition that relationship can trump politics, because we have never agreed on anything political. But I digress. So let's talk about what you should do if you can't use any of these words. You can't say you're belligerent. You can't say you're moody or nitpicky or rigid or anything. So what do? You go to step 2 in the model. Step 2, pinpoint details. Step 2 is the educational move in the model, where you teach them what they said and the impact it had on you. Here's one way to do a self-test. No one should ever again have to ask you for an example when you're raising an issue, because step 2 is the example.
This is the sleeper move in this model. And, you could say on the one hand, well, of course, they have to know exactly what I mean or nothing's going to go forward. And yet it is so often missed. When it's missed, it creates bad blood. And when you hit it and people know precisely what you mean, it takes a lot of the ire away.
Now I'm going to say one other thing that we learned about step 2. And I'd like you to write it at the very bottom of page 23. We're doing a project with the Pew Charitable Trusts. We've been working with them for many years, and they're one of our first beta groups for our online learning system. And they came up with this. I would sure love to take credit, but here's what the statement is. After you're done pinpointing details, you say to the person, here's the impact that had on me. What was going on for you? I'm going to say it again to be sure you all get it. Because remember what you've done. You've pinpointed details. You've told them what they've said, specifically what they said. And then you say, here's the impact that had on me. What was going on for you? And let me tell you why that's so powerful. And leave it to Pew to figure it out. If the goal in these conversations is to get the other person to do 51% of the talking, because Peter shared the research on that, right? The person who does 51% of the talking feels more committed to the outcome, more trust for the other person. There's all kinds of great things. This is a way to boost their talk time. And it's also a way to get them to feel understood right after you've pinpointed the details. So, because this step is so challenging for people, we added a page in these materials, page 24. You'll never believe how we created page 24, by the way. We had people in your seats pinpointing details. I mean, actually writing out step 2. We collected them up, and these came back on their pages. They thought they were pinpointing, but they were not. So please look at these 4 examples of people not pinpointing, and then Peter and I came back and wrote what a pinpoint would actually look like. So please look at that first, and then go to page 28 and continue your dialogue by writing out step 2, pinpointing details.
We'll
and
give you several minutes to do that.
I just want to say one thing. If you're using our scenarios, you're going to have to make stuff up, because we really did try to trap you into words that are not behaviors. So be real careful that you don't just pull out words that we used, like the ones I gave you earlier. That actually came from people in this room. When I said you were belligerent, yeah, I think I wrote them on here. When I said you come across as negative, toxic, and belligerent, we might have said that in our scenario, but you sure can't say that to them. All right, we'll be quiet, give you a chance to read the pinpointing and come up with your own.